Hello, sixth grade students. This is Mr. Kraft coming to you from my room at Cal. This video will be a little bit briefer than the last one. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about angles because in the next page that I'm going to assign you today, it talks about angles a little bit, and I'm not sure how much you've had about them in the past. So let me give you some basic terms, and this will be useful for you later on when you have geometry under Mrs. Mack. So, there are some basic ideas in geometry that we just start off with and take for granted. So, for example, the most basic is a line. Now, a lot of times we will say something is a straight line, but in math, in geometry, there's no other kind. So, for example, this is not a wiggly line. It's not a line at all. It's a curve. Because in math, if it's not straight, it's not a line at all. We put the arrows at each end to show that it goes on forever. It goes on forever that way and forever that way. But since there's no room on the computer to draw forever, we just have to show the arrows. And if we had 2 points on that line, say A and B, we could name that line AB. We write AB together and put a little symbol with 2 arrows on it to show what it is. Now, if it has a beginning and an end, it's not a line, it's a line segment. A line segment has a beginning and an end. So you would call that segment CD. The little dash you'd put over that has no arrows on it. That shows it's a line segment. Now, you could be kind of halfway between. You could have something that has a beginning, but it has no end. Call that EF. And it could go in any direction. It doesn't have to go left to right. It could even go at an angle. GH. We call these things rays. Not like a laser ray, like zap zap, but we call them a ray. They have a beginning but no end. So I would call this ray EF, and I draw the line over it with just 1 arrow to show that it has a beginning and an end. And you always start with the beginning point when you name a ray. Even though H is to the left and G is to the right, I name it GH. And I don't have to draw the ray so it goes up at an angle. I just do that. Okay, so lines, line segments, and rays. Okay. Well, the reason I give you those definitions is an angle. I mean, you know what an angle is. An angle is just when you have 2 rays that have a common beginning point. Or it could be 2 line segments. And let's call this I, J, K. Let's call this L, M, N. The point of an angle, the little point there where it turns, is called the vertex. Excuse me. Vertex is a fancy Latin word. Literally, vertex means turning point. Because here is this line segment just going along, da 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 da, then it turns and goes this way. The vert means turn in Latin. So like if you convert, you convert something, you're changing it into something, turning it into something else. Okay, you don't need to know all that stuff though. So the vertex is in the middle. The way you name an angle, you could name it just by its vertex. So you could call this angle J, and you draw a little angle there. It doesn't matter what way it's turned. If I had an angle turned that way, let's call it PQR. the symbol for angle I still draw the same way. So you could name an angle after just its vertex, angle J, angle Q, angle M. But sometimes, especially if you have two angles together sharing a vertex, it can be kind of confusing. So you could also name this angle LMN, or for that matter, NML. The only important thing is your vertex is always in the middle. So this angle here could be IJK, angle IJK, or KJI. This could be PQR, or RQP. Probably it's usually easier to do it in alphabetical order, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. Well, let's draw a circle. And let's draw a line through the middle of the circle. A line that goes through the middle of the circle is its diameter. Now, if you drew this circle bigger, you draw this diameter, you could draw another diameter, and you could start breaking this circle up into little pie pieces. If we break it up into 360 pie pieces, each of those is called a degree. And the symbol for degree is the same as for the symbol they use when they take your temperature when you come into the building in the morning or in the afternoon or whenever you come in now. You're not coming in at all now, mostly. But the little circle up at the top is degree. So if you chopped a circle up into 360 little pie pieces, each one is called a degree. So if you were to look very, very closely at one of these pie pieces, this angle would be 1 degree. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You would have 360 degrees altogether. And the reason we do that is the ancient people, Babylonians, who lived in what we now call Iraq, but this was about 4,000 years ago. They are the ones who first came up with that. And we have done that ever since. And that's a long story to get into, but I'm not really going to talk about it now. So any angle, you can always imagine that angle like a pie piece cut out of a circle. So we measure angles in degrees. Now, a right angle looks like an L. The reason we call it a right angle is it is the right angle to build with. If you have a house, everything inside is right angles, except for the roof. The roof has to be slanted so that the rain falls off. Everything else is right angles. Even the roof in places like Israel, or places where it's hot and doesn't rain a lot, places like that, even the roof is at right angles. And why do you want it to be a right angle? Right angles are the strongest. If you saw a house that was built like that, you probably wouldn't want to be in it because it looks like it's about to fall. And it would be likely to fall. A right angle, we always put this little square in the corner, because if I drew an angle that was very close to a right angle, just a tiny bit less, just looking at it, it might be hard to tell. So the rule is we always draw that so the people know that that's what we mean. A right angle has 90 degrees, always. If an angle has less than 90 degrees, and it could face either direction, so less than 90 degrees. We call it acute. Like, oh, such a cute little angle. No, it doesn't mean it like that. Acute comes from a Latin word that means sharp. And it is kind of sharp and pointed looking, isn't it? That's what an acute angle looks like. Now, if something has more than 90 degrees, we call it obtuse. And this is more than 90 degrees. Obtuse comes from a Latin word that means blunt or dull. And these look very blunt or dull. This looks very sharp, like a knife. This looks kind of dull. And so if a person, sometimes we say a person is obtuse. If they just don't get what you're talking about, we say they're obtuse. But here we're talking about angles. So if I gave you a bunch of angles and I told you to classify them for me, well, 37 is less than 90 degrees, so we call that acute. 90 is a right angle because a right angle has 90 degrees. And 115 is obtuse because it has more than 90. Then visually looking at them, no matter which way it's turned, the little block is the giveaway for right angles. Acute angles are kind of pointy, and obtuse angles are non-pointy.